Welcome to another episode of the Paperback Warrior podcast. Thanks for listening. You can listen to our debut episode from 1 week ago, broadcast on July 8th, on the Apple or Play Store, Streaker, iHeartRadio, YouTube, and Spotify. Be sure to check out Paperback Warrior at our flagship site, paperbackwarrior.com. You can also read our feeds at Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram weekly. Our site and social media outlets will feature new reviews each weekday at 6 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. The reviews from our archives appear on our various feeds each weekday at 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and also 4 times through the weekend. There's plenty of opportunity there to get your fix. Again, the site is about 4 years old, so there's a lot of content for you to delve into. Again, you'll find our show here on the Paperback Warrior podcast every Monday, and we'll post links to the newest episode and past episodes on all of our social feeds and our site at paperbackwarrior.com. Tom, what do we have on tap for today's show?
Today we have a feature and 2 reviews. The feature is going to be discussing the Fawcett Gold Medal paperbacks, which also ties closely into the origins of the paperback original novels of the 1950s, with Fawcett Gold Medal, I think, being one of the best publishers of the genre at that time, and it holds up very well today. We're also going to be providing reviews of 2 books. I'm going to be reviewing a book called Black Wings Has My Angel by Elliott Chaze, and Eric's going to be reviewing the first book in the Dusky MacMorgan series, which was written under the name Randy Stryker by an author who went on to be a very popular mystery author by the name of Randy Wayne Wright. I'm sorry, Wandy, boy, it's a tough one. Randy Wayne White.
Wascally Wabbit.
Yeah.
Dusky MacMorgan sounds like a 1970s Major League Baseball relief pitcher.
He does. The manager of the Washington Senators, Dusky MacMorgan.
Yes. What a name. All right, so you kind of know what to expect here. We're going to delve into our first feature, which I'm pretty interested in. The last episode, we had discussed our first experiences with action-adventure and crime-noir. And as I explained in that episode, my reading in the 80s was more of the Western variety with some of the Vietnam Commando-style books that seemed to permeate the market. The popularity of the 1984 Red Dawn film propelled me to read a lot of the post-apocalyptic stuff where the American survivors of the nuclear war roamed the countryside fighting bandits and mutants. I gravitated into Stephen King in the 90s and read a lot of horror. But thankfully, Tom's massive home library is stacked with 50s, 60s, and 70s crime fiction. And I wasn't really aware of crime noir. I wasn't reading Raymond Chandler, and I didn't watch old movies. And so these were really new to me and unique. He was gracious enough to lend me stacks of these books, and now I'm just enamored with the whole time period, the fashion, the cars, the authors, the publishers. In my collecting and reading, it seems like the high bar was a publisher named Fawcett Gold Medal. Would you agree?
I think so, and I think in order to understand how Fawcett Gold Medal got a leg up on everybody else, you need to understand sort of the history of 20th century publishing. From 1900 to, let's say, 1939, really books were hardcovers, and books were not something which the common man or woman would read. It was something that people had in these beautiful leather-bound libraries, and it was really a hobby for the rich. It was an expensive hobby to have. Everything changed in 1939 when mass-market paperbacks started coming out. However, for the first 10 years or so of mass-market paperbacks from 1939 to 1949, all they were really doing was reprinting old hardcovers, usually literary novels, in paperback form. And then 1949, something happened that really changed the world. A company called Fawcett Gold Medal, and I think it's arguable whether they were first, but they were certainly one of the first, and the first to do it well and do it correctly in the United States, began producing paperback original novels. And again, these were original novels which cost 25 cents to buy, with beautiful, lurid painted covers that were for fans of paperback fiction and fans of popular fiction, let's call it. This wasn't literary fiction. The authors were paid about $2,000 or $3,000 to write a book, and they were an immediate success. This was a giant gangbuster thing, because at this point you had all these very popular and talented writers who had been kind of put out of work when the pulp fiction magazines had kind of gone by the wayside. So you had all these talented authors who were looking for an audience, and the idea of writing a 180-page novel pretty quickly and turning many of them around again and again and again was a great way for them to make money. And also, it was a way to sell paperbacks to an entirely new market, right? So think of what was going on in 1949. Our boys had come back from war, and they were getting jobs. Sometimes these were working men type of jobs, and they wanted entertainment beyond just radio. And so that's really was the target audience for a lot of these Fawcett Gold Medal paperbacks, where this was not highbrow literary fiction. This was stuff that everybody could enjoy.
Tom, I'm going to interrupt for just a second and ask, and you may have already touched on this, but I just want to clarify. Fawcett Gold Medal was just releasing new titles, right? I mean, this isn't like your, Bantam Books or Dell thing where the publisher is just reprinting old Sherlock Holmes books or Tarzan stories for like their 30th reprinting. You're saying Fawcett Gold Medal was releasing original books.
Yeah, and that was the key, right? That was the angle, and they were really hyping that this was an original novel. And on the covers of the old 25-cent and 35-cent paperbacks from Fawcett Gold Medal, they're kind of beating their chest at the idea that this is an original novel, to such an extent that they would advertise that the Fawcett Gold Medal seal in the upper left-hand corner of the paperback meant that this was an original work of fiction. Now, Fawcett, as a company, did have reprints, but their reprint label was the Fawcett Crest label, and that was a whole different thing. And a lot of other paperback companies kind of fell in right behind them. Lion Books, which is one of my favorites. Ace was doing it with the gimmick of the doubles. Avon, Bantam, Signet. So these book publishers came about. So it wasn't like they had that much of a head start. But I think what Fawcett Gold Medal did better than anyone was quality control. They brought in some of the best authors out there, and they had great editors who basically helped guide those authors through great fiction. And let me just give you a list of some of the authors that got their start writing Fawcett Gold Medal paperbacks. The famous John D. MacDonald. His first paperback was The Brass Cupcake, which is the 26th book that Fawcett Gold Medal ever put out in thousands of titles. Authors Day Keene, Charles Williams, Howard Hunt, who later got himself in trouble during Watergate, David Goodis, Wade Miller, who's actually two guys, Bruno Fisher, Harry Whittington. Richard Prather had a lot of success in the Fawcett Gold Medal with his Shell Scott series, which was later reprinted again and again and again. Donald Hamilton launched and printed, I think, nearly every one of the books in the Matt Helm series on Fawcett Gold Medal. Authors like Lawrence Block and Richard Stark, which is a pseudonym used by Donald Westlake, wrote most of his Parker books. I believe they came out as Fawcett Gold Medal paperbacks. And there were other companies out there who were doing the same thing, trying to play catch-up. I think Lion Books was the best of them. Now, Fawcett Gold Medal wasn't just crime fiction or hard-boiled fiction. They also had romances, kind of character dramas, a few, sometimes they had joke books and stuff like that. They launched westerns. But for my money, if you take a look at it, their suspense fiction, crime fiction, and espionage fiction was really the top of the heap. Characters like Sam Durrell by Edward Ahrens, his assignment series, would not have existed in the form that we know them today if it wasn't for Fawcett Gold Medal. Another interesting thing to know, which is very significant to us today, because you don't want to have to spend a fortune on one of these old 25-cent books. It just feels weird paying $25 or $100 for a 70-year-old paperback that originally cost 25 cents. But Fawcett Gold Medal allowed the intellectual property rights for the books to go to the authors themselves. And so I don't know what the backroom deal was between them or what the contracts looked like, but all of these authors owned their own work. And so later on, when either they or their estates wanted to sell the rights to these books to a new publisher after Fawcett Gold Medal had kind of gone down the toilet in the early 1970s, these books could reoccur. So you could read the Matt Helm books today. You could read Lawrence Block's greatest hits today. David Goodis books are frequently reprinted. Harry Whittington, not enough of his books have been reprinted, but several had. And their editors really just sort of shared my sensibility. They even a author that everybody loved, like Harry Whittington, if a book by Harry Whittington was not up to snuff, Fawcett Gold Medal would reject it and send it to him, and then he'd begin shopping it to the other paperback houses, and that's why he wrote several ace doubles, and that's why he reworked some of his novels as porno novels at one stage of his career. So I guess I just want to impress upon you that the Fawcett Gold Medal seal, if you get an old book that has that, probably means that some real thought was put into that book by editors who wanted to make sure that this book got to market, and this is generally a work of quality fiction.
And Tom and I both agree that we're not art hunters. We like the contents of books. I think Tom maybe said on the last episode, or he's been known to say he has a library, not a collection. But Fawcett Gold Medal had awesome artwork.
Amazing. Their artwork's great. So I'm not saying that I'm not subjected to that, but I look at it like, well, you know, the art on the Fruit Loops box is really great, but I actually prefer to eat the Fruit Loops. And so there's a lot of people out there in the collectors community who obsessed over who the artist was and all that. That's just not something which is of interest to me. I have tons and tons of paperbacks, but I'm happy to read the same book on Kindle. I'm a reader, not a collector, and art critics, I think it's fantastic, and it certainly sucks me in because those covers are so beautiful and lurid, but it's just not my expertise, and it's nothing that really appeals to me all that much.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I do miss when the artwork when I get a reprint. Starkhouse does a fantastic job of reprinting a lot of this, but we miss the artwork, and same thing with the Kindle versions or the electronic files. You miss some of the artwork because I guess they don't have permission to rerun that artwork again.
I've noticed that Starkhouse, though, lately has been reproducing some of the old artwork, and I don't know what the legalities are for any of that or anything like that's not my area of expertise. But I think Starkhouse, which I think for its money was putting out better reprinted books than Hard Case Crime was. But Hard Case Crime had Robert McGinnis and all these had these amazing artists producing old retro covers. And Starkhouse, when they started, were doing very unimaginative covers. But I think they've been hearing that loud and clear. And lately, their releases over the past couple of years have had beautiful covers. And that's great. If you're going to have the same book, you might as well have it with a nice cover.
You may have already said this, and I can't remember, but you've said it to me in the past. What's the old adage with comparing ace doubles to Fawcett?
Yeah, someone once told me, and I don't think this is true, because I've read a lot of ace double mystery novels, and I've read a lot of Fawcett Gold Medals, but I read on some blog somewhere, and so I apologize if the blogger is listening and jumping up and down that I'm misquoting them, that the worst Fawcett Gold Medal crime novel is better than the best ace double crime novel. I don't think that's true, but I do think there's a noticeable difference between the two lines of books as far as their quality and the likelihood that you're going to read a 180-page masterpiece.
So we agree. Fawcett Gold Medal was setting the bar pretty high for these paperback publishers, and Fawcett had it good for about 3 decades.
Yeah, but man, when you start reading these 1972, 1973 Fawcett Gold Medal standalone paperbacks, there's some bad content in there. The editors had probably moved on. They were experiencing market pressure from Pinnacle, who was just killing it in the early 1970s with their men's serial vigilante series, and I think Fawcett Gold Medal tried to play catch up with them and just failed miserably. I don't know what corporate mergers have happened and who owns all that right now, but it doesn't really matter because the authors own the content. So if you want to read a book by Basil Heatter, Heatter, who's a great author who wrote some Fawcett Gold Medal books back in the day, you're going to have to find out who Basil Heater's estate is publishing through these days.
So, put you on the spot for a second. When did it dry up for Fawcett? About what year did the bottom fall out?
Man, well, it's hard to say, right? Because they had series like the Matt Helms series by Donald Hamilton, which eventually kind of got bad, but they were publishing, the Parker books by Richard Stark. I think maybe even into the late '60s. To me, if I see a 1970s Fawcett Gold Medal title, I'm probably going to buy it because I'm a maniac and I buy books that I won't ever read. But if I do read it, I'm going to be reading it with the knowledge that this is probably not a great work of American pulp literature.
Yeah. I would say by the 80s, then the market just gets saturated by Bantam or Signet, and like you mentioned, Pinnacle and then you just didn't see Fawcett anymore. It was just like here.
I feel like there were some Fawcett titles that came out, like the giant 350-page Matt Helm books, the last few that no one ever reads, because I think, and they're hard to find actually, because I think most of them were probably stripped by Crown Books and B. Dalton booksellers back in the days. So they may have had some 80s titles. I really don't know what happened to the imprint. If you do know, please email us or comment on our website and social media.
Yeah, I'd be curious to get the full scoop on when it dried up and when they went out of business and that kind of thing. So, yeah, that's really interesting. A really fascinating piece. We'll get into more of these kind of things in the future with various publishers. I think Tom and I want to talk about line books in the future. I'd love to do a whole piece on Pinnacle. Talk a little bit about what Signet was trying to do, and we're actually going to talk about Signet in the next segment here, when I discussed the Dusky MacMorgan series. But I guess we'll move over into the reviews now and actually talk about that. Yeah, so that's talking about Signet sort of being in popularity, I guess would be the best term, in the late 70s, 80s, and even into the 90s. Signet was trying their best to compete with Pinnacle. And we're going to talk about a short-lived series called MacMorgan, or what some people call Dusky MacMorgan. This is a stereotypical action-adventure series that came out in the 80s. And what Signet was trying to do, in 1980, they wanted their own vigilante-styled series that would hopefully capitalize on the success of the Mac Bolan Executioner universe, which spun into the Stoney Doctrine. Out of the Stoney Doctrine, it became Able Team and Phoenix Force. So they were hoping to run with this and create a vigilante hero that essentially could walk through hell covered in gasoline and not catch on fire. I mean, that's sort of the stereotypical action hero of the 70s and 80s. So Signet wanted that, and they had a distinct set of characteristics that they wanted their hero to possess. Of course, he had to be the obligatory Vietnam vet. Oddly, they wanted him to be a Key West resident, handsome, freakishly strong, and they wanted him to be consistent with the 70s and 80s action-adventure pop culture. They wanted to have a long-running series, and they wanted to split it up into a rotating shift of 4 authors. So while they've got one book out, they've already got authors writing the next 3, and then it goes back to the author that started it. So 4 rotating authors to put out a mammoth amount of volumes. Problem is they didn't have any authors. They had a hero that they wanted to feature, had a little bit of a story to tell, but they didn't have any authors. So a Signet editor spots a short story written by Randy Wayne White in an issue of Outside Magazine. Randy Wayne White was a guy who I think had some military background, and they had read this story. Randy Wayne White was living in the Caribbean or off the coast of Florida, somewhere in that general vicinity, and they liked what he had said in the Outside Magazine short story. So they reached out to him and said, "Hey, we want to write this long-running series featuring this character, and we want you to take a shot at it. Write the first 3 chapters and then get back to us, and we'll critique it and decide if you're going to be one of the foursome that's going to write this story." Randy Wayne White ran with it, and he wrote the entire first novel in 9 days, gave it back to Signet. Signet loved it and said, "Hey, not only are you included in this project, but you're going to be the sole writer. You're going to pen every novel." It didn't have as much success as they thought. The series ran, I'm looking it up now, I apologize, I should have had that in front of me, but it ran a small amount of installments, actually it's 7, from 1981 to 1982. So this is Randy Wayne White's first project. He wrote it under a pseudonym of Randy Stryker, and it didn't last long, and then he went to audition for Dell, and he created a much longer series called Hawker, which I think is a more superior series. Others might disagree. And Hawker ran for 11 novels before Randy Wayne White really hit his prime, which was the Doc Ford series, which was massively successful. was really his bread and butter, and he really cashed in with that best-selling series. But Randy Wayne White, and rightfully so, really failed to acknowledge that these books existed, the Hawker series and the MacMorgan series, and he was sort of embarrassed and ashamed of them. But now he's accepted it. He's put these books out again. Signet has relaunched these into ebooks with different cover art, thankfully. And he's now acknowledging that he wrote these, and he's not embarrassed any longer. So the short story here is with MacMorgan. As a child, he worked in the circus, and he was a big top performer. And in this weird scene, the big top catches on fire. He loses his family. He's an orphan. He gets shipped around. At age 16, he joins the Navy SEALs and goes into the Vietnam War, does a few tours there with his best friend, and comes back home, marries an actress, lives in Key West, and runs a charter fishing business. Well, he's out one day on the charter fishing business and receives word that his buddy from Vietnam, who lives in the area, has just been murdered by thugs on his boat. And MacMorgan sets out on a vigilante spree here to avenge his friend's loss, and goes out and hunts and murders down the people that killed his friend. Retaliation comes from the corrupt senator that they're working for, who bombs a car that was supposed to have MacMorgan in it, but instead it was his wife and 2 kids. So now Randy Wayne White, who wrote this as Randy Stryker, has a series. MacMorgan is going to be the vigilante, stopping crime, killing bad guys to avenge the loss of his family. And this first book isn't very good.
It looks dreadful.
It's not good. It's wacky. There's this whole weird thing that made me a little uncomfortable, where you've got MacMorgan in his late 20s, early 30s, and he's staying with a friend after the explosion. His family dies. His friend has a daughter, 18-year-old daughter, who's running around in the swampland wearing a thin nightgown. And I don't know the crowd that's reading these things. I guess they're 30-something, 40-something men reading this thing, and White writes it as if MacMorgan is throbbing to bang this 18-year-old girl in the swamp who's wearing a nightgown. A little weird.
Are these maritime adventures? The old covers all look like Travis McGee novels with automatic weapons.
Yeah, he's on a boat. He's going up and down the coastline. In this particular novel, he's infiltrating a base, or an island base, that this corrupt senator is living on, and is basically running a drug empire off this island. And MacMorgan is approached by the government and asked to join their task force unofficially and go out and do surveillance. They don't really want him killing the bad guys, but in this episode, he goes out, does some surveillance, ends up getting trapped on the island, and then obliterating as many bad guys as he can in the stereotypical bravado way that these high-numbered action-adventure novels are written. It's not particularly good. As I mentioned earlier, Hawker is better. It's a more superior series with a more believable character. MacMorgan is invincible. And there's actually a really neat weapon that MacMorgan uses. Think about this. It's a remote control mechanical shark bite. It's
like a shark robot?
Like a shark robot. It's think of like a bear trap.
All
so
right.
if someone gets close to it, the trap goes off, and then it clasps down and bites. So he's got this shark bite instrument that he's got in the water, and he can press a button and it'll snap a guy's leg or arm off. Absolutely over the top, fun, not particularly good. I don't know if I'll read another one, but who knows? A rainy day will produce any type of book, I guess. But that's Dusky MacMorgan #1. Look for it on the paperbackwarrior.com website this week. And that's all I have for...
Listeners should know that Eric has an incredibly high tolerance for bad men's adventure fiction. Like, he is willing to power through these things no matter how bad they are and actually finish them. I have a much lesser tolerance for bad books. Like if I get a couple chapters into a book and it's not grabbing me, my philosophy is that life's too short and there's just too many books out there to suffer through a really terrible book, even if it's in furtherance of a bad review. So the fact that you didn't like this book says volumes about it. And it's interesting because a lot of people I know actually like this series. And people who particularly like maritime adventures and say that this is the more superior of the two Randy Wainwright pseudonymous men's adventure series. But I take you as the final word.
Yeah, I won't. It won't be on my shopping list anytime soon. Maybe if I run out of all these 80s and 70s action adventure novels, I might try another one. Maybe it improves. I didn't particularly like Hawker's debut, Florida Firefight, which mirrors a lot of the same action in this book. I didn't particularly care for that, but I tried another one, and that series, as it progressed, got much better. Maybe this one does too.
Well, if this is his first series, maybe it took him some time to find his legs. That happens regularly.
Yeah, his career is really three tales. This, which was a failure, Hawker, which was semi-successful for Dell, and then the wildly successful Doc Ford series.
Those Doc Ford books have been a license to print money for this guy.
Yeah.
All right, so anyway, if you have read the Dusty MacMorgan series and you want to tell Eric he's crazy and that this is a masterpiece of the genre, or that the later books are definitely worth reading and he shouldn't give up on this character, please let us know on our social media or by emailing us at paperbackwarrior@yahoo.com. Can we move on?
Sure, yeah, go ahead.
Okay, I want to talk about a Fawcett Gold Medal book from 1953 called Black Wings Has My Angel, by Elliott Chaze, Chaze. First thing to know is that Elliott Chaze is Lewis Elliott Chaze, who lived from 1915 to 1990. He was a World War II veteran and a journalist, and he was a mainstream literary novelist during the 1950s. And this was his dip into the Fawcett Gold Medal crime novel. He probably wanted to make $2,000 or $3,000 for a book. And again, it was titled Black Wings Has My Angel, and it's been reprinted many, many times since 1953. Sometimes it was reprinted as One for the Money, and it was also reprinted as One for My Money. And this is a highly sought-after Fawcett Gold Medal paperback by collectors. So you're going to spend a fortune trying to get the original one with the original artwork, but that problem has been solved by a California company called Stark House Books that has brought this paperback from literary hibernation and has put it into a trade paperback, which is a double with an excellent novel called One is a Lonely Number by Bruce Elliott. Anyway, so Black Wings Has My Angel is about a guy named Tim Sunblade, who is a roughneck. He's a roughnecker. I guess that means like in working on an oil drilling thing down in Louisiana. So he gets done with his job, and he does what all roughneckers do, evidently. He orders a prostitute to his hotel room to enjoy her company. And so he's surprised to see a woman named Virginia being sent up as the prostitute that he orders in like a pizza. And this Virginia is a total knockout, right? And so she's one of these femme fatales that were in a lot of Fawcett Gold Medal books who help lead a guy into even deeper temptation than he's already in. And so after a few days of spending some quality time, and again, this is 1953, so it's not graphically sexual, but it's pretty clear what the heck they're doing in this hotel room, he decides that he's going to bring this Virginia girl along with him on his road trip because he's got plans.
Is she seasoned? I mean, she's got the word virgin in her name.
I suspect that she was not a virgin. She's a pretty conniving lady who's definitely a strong female character. She's not just baggage. But his thought was that he's going to bring her along, continue using her for sex and company, and then if he gets tired of her, he's just going to abandon her at a rest stop on his way out to Denver. So they make it out to Colorado, and then we begin to learn what Tim has in mind is a heist. He's planned a heist. I'm not going to give too much away because this is a heist novel, and he needs Virginia as an accomplice in this heist. And so I'm not, again, it's really difficult because I don't want to spoil this for you, but this is a really, really violent novel, and it's got all sorts of twists and turns and double crosses and genuinely sick stuff, and it's just really dark, and it's absolutely amazing. Chaze is a fantastic writer. He writes this book he wrote in first person, which I actually like in the Fawcett Gold Medal genre for first person narrators. Very conversational tone. You feel like you've just sided up with a guy at a bar who's going to tell you a story. He has some real smart thoughts about the human condition, and sometimes his prose is actually beautiful and literary, and you can see that this is a guy who actually was thoughtful when he wrote a book instead of just kind of dashing off a novel a month. I don't have a bad word to say about this book. It was fantastic. It was just an entertaining piece of noir history. Folks who are really into this genre talk about this as one of the unsung classics of the genre. The fact that it's been reprinted by Starkhouse, even in a double, is just absolutely manna from heaven. If you enjoy those type of novels, if you like these kind of dark, twisted books of Harry Whittington and Gil Brewer and Peter Rabe, this is a book that you really should not miss. So Black Wings has My Angel is an absolute wonder of a novel, and you can look at my full review this week on paperbackwarrior.com.
And you said this one's available through Starkhouse, I'm assuming at a pretty affordable price. Does it come with any other books?
Yeah, it's a double with One Is a Lonely Number by Bruce Elliott, another book of the same era that's also been reviewed on Paperback Warrior's website. So you can go back and check that out also if you want to see that review. I mean, the fact that they put these two books together was just sheer genius on behalf of Starkhouse. These two books are fantastic, and they make quite a piece to read them back to back.
Fantastic. Yeah, I look forward to reading that one. Yeah, I guess that's really our episode for this week. Tom, can you give us a little idea of what we're going to be doing next week?
Next week on the Paperback Warrior podcast, you're going to hear a feature story on what is next week's feature story? I should know this.
I think you wanted to discuss Jonathan Craig.
Oh, Jonathan Craig, an author named, I believe, is Frank E. Smith, who wrote a bunch of books as Jonathan Craig. I maintain that he is an unsung hero of the genre that nobody seems to appreciate. And so I'm going to make a case for Jonathan Craig. And we also have reviews of books. Do we want to say what the reviews are, or should that be a surprise?
I think you should say the book that has the acronym BLO on air.
BLO. Oh, heck. Okay, so I'm going to be reviewing a book that was released under the name of Bloodlust Orgy by I'm embarrassed to have to say that, but I'm going to tell you exactly why Bloodlust Orgy is a significant novel for people in this genre and not just pure exploitation. So stay tuned next week for the Bloodlust Orgy reveal.
All right, so again, be sure to follow us at paperbackwarrior.com. You can also follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. And again, the show episodes are going to be available on Spotify, iHeartRadio, YouTube, Spreaker, the Apple and Google Store. You can also knock on your neighbor's house. I'm sure they're listening. You'll find plenty of ways to contact us. Don't hesitate to drop us a line. Let us know how we're doing. You can post comments on our social feeds. You can email us at paperbackwarrior@yahoo.com. We're a vintage fiction site, so we're using a vintage email at Yahoo.
Partying like it's 1995.
That's right, man. Let us know how we're doing. What books you might suggest to us that we want to look at here at paperbackwarrior.com or talk about on the show. Again, thanks a lot for listening. Remember, you'll see new reviews every weekday morning, 6 a.m. Eastern Standard Time at paperbackwarrior.com. There's a massive amount of archived reviews. We'll be featuring one every weekday at 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on paperbackwarrior.com's social media at Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. But again, thanks so much for listening, and we'll see you next week.
Bye.